Guys! Guys! Yoo-hoo!
XIII. This is a game that came from a pretty interesting period of time. At least from where I'm seeing. It was a very short period of time where Ubisoft was kind of experimenting and developing some really interesting things. Before this, at least for me, they pretty much just published weird nonsense. Stuff like Evolution, which I don't think all that many people remember, but it was an interesting dungeon crawling RPG with no definitive edition in North America because it was released kinda weird. But then this period of time happened where they released a trilogy of really interesting games. First you had Beyond Good and Evil, which I only played once like 20 years ago, but I remember falling in love with that game and I really need to try that one again. Then you had XIII, which, I mean, we're gonna talk about, but it's a comic book license that's turned into an FPS, and it's actually really interesting, and we're gonna talk about that. And then of course you have the big one, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, a reboot to Prince of Persia that kind of kicked off everything for them. I mean, after Sands of Time, which was a perfectly good standalone title that should have remained that, they decided to turn it into a trilogy of games, and then they tried to make a spin-off with Assassin's Creed, and, well, I mean, now we're basically where we are today, where Ubisoft releases basically the same game every year with some slightly tweaked variables, which effectively makes them the Stephen King of game development. But going back to that, I just have a fondness for this sort of period of time. It was a time where Ubisoft seemed like they were experimenting, taking some risks, and doing something genuinely interesting, and a little bit more experimentative and risky was what they were doing. But I never actually played XIII. It's the only one in the trilogy of really interesting games from this time I haven't played, but fortunately Sly Boots hooked me up with a copy, and I have to say, I'm kind of sad I waited this long to play XIII. I'd only really heard about it before, but it was a lot of fun and very, very different from a lot of FPSs. Now before we get into this, it should be noted there are two versions of XIII on Steam. There's the original version, which came out a long time ago, and then there's a newer version that came out in 2020, which, looking at it, ooh, well that's not very good now, is it? So it should be noted that I am playing on a Steam Deck, and while it is labeled as unsupported, this is the original classic version of XIII, and it works mostly perfectly fine. There's one or two issues I ran into it, mostly a couple missing textures in some really obscure places you won't normally see, so that's not too big a deal. The only really big impactful thing is that, for some reason, while this game works more or less fine with a controller. Well, first of all, it wasn't made for a controller. This is definitely a mouse-driven game on PC, and I get that, so aiming's going to be a little bit less forgiving for you. For some reason, duck isn't mapped to the controls, and that's something you absolutely need to get through the game, so you're going to have to remap duck like I did. But that's really the biggest issues that this has on Steam Deck. It otherwise pretty much works without issue. And not only does that save you money instead of buying the newer version, because it is cheaper, as I understand it's just flat out better. I mean, it's not mostly negative on Steam, so there's that too. So yeah, if you've got a Steam Deck and you're looking at the classic version because it's cheaper and isn't half as badly reviewed, yeah, works more or less fine. Now, XIII is a video game tie-in, if you can believe it, which is weird because it's actually pretty good. It's based on a Belgian comic book series that's been going on since the 80s, and is still running today to my understanding. And I actually have a little bit of familiarity with this because there was actually a Canadian film that was based on it. It starred Val Kilmer. You know, he was Batman that one time? Either way, XIII is actually a game based on a comic book license. And again, like I said, it's weird because it's good. The story features 13. Yeah, I know, it's a real creative name here. A guy marked with the Roman numeral 13. He doesn't really know who he is beyond that. He washes up on the beach with seemingly no memory after presumably taking a head wound or having massive asphyxiation in the ocean. He's rescued by a local lifeguard who takes him to a lifeguard station. Unfortunately, that lifeguard is then gunned down in cold blood right in front of him. And there's a lot of people getting in line to try and shoot 13 here. So he has to go on the run and figure out who he is, what his history is, why everyone wants him dead, and this unravels into a massive conspiracy of political intrigue, because this is basically a really cool spy thriller. Fortunately, 13 is not alone in all this. He has an old acquaintance that seems to know who he is, although they don't want to tell him all that much about who they are. He apparently is even acquainted and very good friends with a general, who's played by Adam West. You know, he was Batman that one time? This is just the IP where Batmans go to hang out. There's actually a conspiracy within a conspiracy here. 13 is actually a secret meeting organization for former Batman actors, where they secretly control the flow of comic book sales and secretly control the government behind the scenes. They won't tell you this, but That's what 13 really is. I don't really want to talk too much more in depth about what the story to 13 is, because it is a spy thriller with a lot of unraveling about who you are and what's really going on in this conspiracy, but I will say it's really well told and it goes some interesting places. I like this story a lot, and the framing devices by which it is told is through the comic book panels themselves. The way they tell the story here, it's really well done and it's really interesting, and it kept me intrigued. The gameplay to 13 is a first-person shooter, but it's anything but standard. It does some things that, honestly, I can't say I've found in any other FPS. Primarily, just its pacing and tone. While this is a first-person shooter, it isn't a shooty bang Rambo action fest. The name of the game is spy thriller, so there's equal parts quiet, introspective moments of stealth and trying to get around enemies without triggering alarms or using improvised props that are located in the environments. I really appreciate this. The fact that you can just walk into a room, see a chair, pick it up, and smash someone over the back of the head without alerting anyone else, provided they weren't watching. It does make you feel very cool to get through an environment without alerting all the guards ever. And utilizing the medium of it sort of being a comic booky property, the fact that there's frequently like onomatopoeia for sound effects means that stealth is a lot more of a visually engaging experience. Not only do you have to look for enemy movement, but you can look for sound, and that helps you create a better route through certain environments and figuring out how to take out your opponents more effectively. I really appreciated this, and it was cool to see how stealth became an even more visually engaging experience. I wasn't just looking at a little eyeball on my screen to see if people saw me. No, it was like I just had to look around and see, well, is there movement over there? Is there sound coming from over there? Oh, hey, yeah, there is. Okay, well, that guy's dead. There's no more sound, and no one's raising any alarms, so I think I pulled it off. The visual aspect of the stealth make it a lot better, honestly. And it's not something I'd ever really have thought about in creating a more engaging stealth situation, but it works. That said, there are also moments which are purely dedicated entirely to action, and I think one of the things that kind of bugs me about all this is the fact that they're pretty much entirely dictated solely by the plot itself. Like, there are just arbitrary moments where you pretty much are dedicated to stealth and moments that the game forces you to be purely action. And if you don't 100% resonate with one of those gameplay styles or the other, you're kind of a little bit screwed. There is one moment where it was purely stealth, and in theory you could play it loud if you took out every enemy that heard you before they raised an alarm, which on a theoretical level is certainly possible, but it feels like the game is purely designed for you to take stealth at this exact moment, action at this exact moment, and if you do anything else, you'll just die instantly, or the person you need to protect will die instantly. Yeah, I don't necessarily like that, which ironically means that in a very weird sense, I think this game would have worked better if they used more modern Ubisoft sensibilities of ostensibly giving you some vague sense of control over what you did. Weird. I guess they did get better about some things. They really didn't. They're an awful company. Frequently, the game is about escaping pursuit. There's actually quite a lot of different sort of gameplay styles being implemented here at various points. The actual shooty bang parts of this game are decent enough. The weapons feel impactful enough, and I appreciate that when you get a really nice shot on an enemy, the game will actually cut to a comic panel zoom in, picture in picture, just to let you marvel your own handiwork a little bit. This was more or less a version of like the Fallout kill cam 5 years before the Fallout kill cam was a thing. It's a cool way to make you feel a little bit more empowered, and it's a nice little special thing that really does hit home how this is both a comic book and that this is what this game is. I think this is specifically what this game was kind of remembered for. Unfortunately, the weapons themselves I don't think are going to be what this game is remembered for, because while they're impactful enough, they don't really do anything special, nor are there really any that are all that memorable. It goes through the standard motions of pistol, slightly different pistol that's a little bit louder, assault rifle, submachine gun, shotgun, sniper rifle. There was one weapon that I did quite enjoy, and that was the crossbow, because it was entirely silenced. Like, that was a cool weapon. I liked using that, but just in general, while the weapons are impactful enough and it's fun to use them, I especially got a lot of use out of the shotgun. That was kind of my workhorse weapon. There wasn't anything that really jumped out at me as being all that special or memorable as a weapon itself, The gunplay itself is fine. It's just not necessarily all that special. While the maps themselves are designed fairly linearly, there's a couple of moments where you'll get alternate routes through some stuff. And heck, there's even moments where it actually turns into a slightly more open map that lets you handle the problem any way you like. I remember specifically running through the snowy mountains with General Batman, and we run across this like guard station we need to get past, and he's basically like, all right, take out the guards any way you want. And you could go in, go loud if you want, but I, on the other hand, because I'm me, decided, no, I'm going to take care of this problem about a mile away with my silenced crossbow, and I'm going to take them all out without raising an alarm. And I felt like the freaking Predator when I did that. It was so much fun. I cared slightly less about the next level, which was entirely an escort quest with heavy resistance, but still, the gameplay is willing to allow you to have a lot of openness in how you handle certain problems in specific situations. And I do appreciate that they're willing to stop holding your hand and let you just enjoy the game for what it is, even if it's only for specific moments. This game even features a grappling hook, although I'm not too enthused about it, honestly. Like, grappling hooks pretty much make every game better functionally, but here, it's more or less just a thing that gets you to the next set piece. And I think that's a massive missed opportunity. You know, utilizing grappling hooks in games basically effectively makes you the master of your terrain. You can use it to flank enemies and get around obstacles and get a better handle on the situation, but here, no, not really. It's more or less utilized as just a key for a slightly more vertical door to just move on to the next bit, and I feel like that's a huge missed opportunity that could have made the gameplay a lot more unique and interesting, especially for its time. Missed opportunity. Overall, 13 is an excellent game in terms of gameplay. It's fast and fluid. The chaotic action of requiring you to improvise weapons on the fly in some cases is really exciting. Having to swap between stealth and action on a dime is great. It's a very, very fun game, and I think in terms of a gameplay experience, it does things excellently. The overall presentation of 13 is excellent and varied. It's one of the first games I can think of that utilized cell shading. It's bright and it's colorful. It has a kill cam, which is pretty remarkable for its time and definitely helps it stand out. The use of color and cell shading makes this game visually kind of ageless, which is weird that they felt they needed to visually update this game. And I mean, as I understand, that's pretty much the only update they made to this game and why the remake is bad. Or at least to my understanding, I still haven't played it. The use of comic book panels and motion in the cutscenes, as well as just standard cutscenes, combined with the first-person action and kill cam, gives it a very visually varied experience as well. It's not something that your eyes really ever get tired of because it's always mixing things up just to sort of distract you from the fact that you're still running around with a gun shooting people over and over if that's not engaging enough for you for some reason. I appreciate the fact that it's utilizing multiple different mediums to affect both the gameplay visually but also the experience as a whole visually, you know? It was very, very well done and it creates a very well told story. Audio-wise, it is pretty phenomenal. The voice acting has some fairly big names in here, and they do a great job, I think. The guns sound decent enough. Again, similar to the individual guns themselves, I don't think there's anything too stand out audibly about the guns themselves, but they do a good enough job. And the music fits the theme of being a spy thriller really, really well. There's moments of quietness and tenseness, but then it might kick off into like some high energy jazz nonsense. It works really, really well. It has a great sense of energy and tone that works well with the varied flow of gameplay. Overall, the presentation itself is probably one of the most remarkable things about this game, and it's a pretty solid game just in general. Now, if you want a copy of 13, if you're looking for it on Steam right now, well, first of all, you should be looking up 13-Classic, because we're in an age where pretty much every game coming out nowadays is games that came out 20 years ago, but worse. Either way, it is normally about $18, although currently it is on sale for $2. This game is well worth that. It was also available on the PS2, which I can find on eBay for $8, Xbox for actually about the same price, and on GameCube, which costs more than double that, and also it's on GameCube. I'm not sure how well that would actually work as an FPS, because I imagine you'd probably be using the C stick, and that would be awkward to say the least, but you've got options if you want to play 13, and it's pretty much dirt cheap wherever you go, which is pretty remarkable because it's a great game. And I have to give a big shout out and thank you to Sly Boots for hooking me up with 13, along with a bunch of other games I'm still sitting on. Seriously, I've got so many Steam games I need to get through. I'm working on it. Someday I will get to Garfield Kart. I promise. Someday. At the end of the day, 13 is a game that I had never played before, and I didn't really know what to expect, other than, you know, it's a comic book game. But I was really impressed with it. Sure, it's a bit dated, and sure, some of its features could be a little bit better updated, like the grappling hook. I still think huge missed opportunity they didn't use the grappling hook for more strategic options, honestly. But 13 was a kind of an emblematic moment in history. You know, it was a time when Ubisoft was actually willing to experiment and try different things, you know, similar to how they did with Beyond Good and Evil and how they rebooted Prince of Persia, then ran that series into the ground, then ran a spin-off series into the ground, and made every game basically just open world Ubisoft sandbox because of that game's success. You know, part of me really does wish we could just outlaw any sort of remake, remaster, or sequel, just so that we could continue to get more interesting experimentative games from people with money. As of now, like, what, half the games that come out from big developers are either sequels or remakes to things that we got years ago, and they're worse than the ones that came out before. Kids today are not going to have things to be nostalgic over because the games they're going to experience are bad, bizarro world scraps of what we had as kids. And that deeply bothers me. I like talking about weird, interesting things, and I worry that in the future there just won't be any because, well, retro gaming seems to be an increasingly dying breed of sorts. It's considered a commodity, and at most is badly ported or badly sequelized. And people who want to actually explore retro stuff, well, it's getting increasingly expensive because people try and find a way to capitalize on it that will prevent them from doing so. It's a sad state of affairs, but at least we have something cool like this that's still available. And the fact that it's affordable and different and interesting, I think makes it worthwhile to look at. Just ignore the bad remake, which I guess I can say about most games coming out nowadays. This was really not the tone I wanted to end this on. Wait, George Clooney? Christian Bale? What are you doing here? In Batman outfits. Oh, this does not bode well.